The Vanguard was unlike any other ship in the fleet. Its sleek, powerful design gleamed under the light of distant stars as it entered the war zone, a zone known for its ruthless alien forces. The galaxy had long feared these invaders, who crushed planets and civilizations without mercy. Yet humanity, with its determination and ingenuity, had crafted the Vanguard a ship that could turn the tide of war in their favor. But what made it so special was a secret the alien forces had no idea about. Captain Laura Hayes stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, her eyes fixed on the screen ahead. She had led her crew through countless battles, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher, the tension thicker. "All systems are online," reported Lieutenant Ramos, the ship's chief engineer. "We're ready, Captain." Captain Hayes nodded. Her heart raced, but she didn't show it. There was too much at risk. The Vanguard was humanity's last hope against the alien forces who had already decimated several colonies. If they lost this battle, there would be no more chances. The enemy's massive warships loomed ahead, alien ships that could wipe out entire fleets in minutes. They had no idea what was coming. Laura's hand hovered over the controls. "Initiate cloaking," she ordered. The Vanguard shimmered, disappearing from the sensors of the alien ships. For a few moments, the bridge was silent. The crew knew their role. They had to strike quickly and decisively. But the true weapon of the Vanguard was still hidden from everyone, even from the crew. Only Captain Hayes knew what they were really up against. The battle began with a burst of energy. The Vanguard decloaked, and in an instant, the enemy ships were under fire. The humans had a surprise and advanced energy weapon that was powerful enough to take down entire fleets. But it wasn't the weapon that was the real game changer. The aliens quickly fired back, launching their destructive plasma beams at the Vanguard. But to their shock, the ship's hull absorbed the attacks without a scratch. The Vanguard had an energy shield, but this was no ordinary shield. The alien blasts bounced off harmlessly, leaving the Vanguard unscathed. "What the hell?" one of the alien commanders growled. He had never seen anything like this before. His forces were equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, but they were useless against this human ship. Captain Hayes gave a grim smile. "Activate secondary power," she said quietly. The Vanguard surged forward, cutting through the enemy ranks. The alien ships scattered in panic, unsure of how to fight back. But Hayes knew that the shield wouldn't be enough. There was another surprise waiting, one that could change everything. The ship's sensors pinged. Something was wrong. Lieutenant Ramos quickly checked the readouts. "Captain, we're picking up a strange energy reading coming from the alien fleet." "What is it?" Hayes asked, her voice sharp. "It's not like anything we've ever seen before," Ramos replied, his face pale. "It's as if they're calling something. Hayes' mind raced. Could they be activating their own hidden weapon? Was this part of their plan all along? Before she could say another word, a massive explosion ripped through the silence. One of the enemy ships, much larger than the others, opened fire. The blast struck the Vanguard's shields, sending a shockwave through the ship. The crew held on as the ship trembled, but the shields held strong. Hayes frowned. "What the hell is that ship?" she muttered. It had to be the command ship, but the energy it released was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The aliens had brought out their big guns. The Vanguard fired back, but the enemy ship's defenses were even stronger. It was clear that this ship had more advanced technology than anything the humans had faced before. But Captain Hayes knew something the aliens didn't. "Bring up the secret weapon," she ordered. "It's time." Ramos hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The crew worked quickly, activating the hidden power of the Vanguard. The ship's core hummed with energy, and the air seemed to crackle with electricity. The weapon, something no one had seen before, was ready. In a flash, the Vanguard released a beam of energy, unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. It was pure, raw power, cutting through the enemy ship's shields with ease. The alien ship's weapons systems short-circuited as the beam hit their power core, and within moments, the massive ship exploded, sending debris flying in all directions. The rest of the alien fleet was in chaos. They had never expected such power. The humans had something they couldn't even comprehend, and it was too late for the aliens to adapt. But even as the vanguard pressed its advantage, Hayes knew the battle was far from over. The aliens were smart. They would find a way to counter this new weapon. And they were relentless. But the humans had something else, the will to fight, to survive. They had the strength to keep going. No matter what. The vanguard moved deeper into the heart of the battle. The crew knew they were on the verge of something bigger. This battle wasn't just about defeating the aliens, it was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity was here, and they were ready to fight. Captain Hayes stared ahead, her gaze hardening. "We've only just begun," she said to her crew. "Prepare for the next wave. We're not finished yet." And as the vanguard sailed through the war zone, the alien forces could only watch in disbelief. The tide had turned, and humanity had revealed a hidden power that would change the course of the war forever. The Eagle was humanity's last hope, a warship designed to survive in the harshest of conditions. But as it entered the war zone, Captain Marcus Gray knew that survival wasn't going to be easy. The alien alliance, the Exile Thar, had already destroyed entire colonies, and now they were preparing to crush Earth's final defense. Marcus stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the vast, dark space ahead. Around him, the crew worked quickly, their faces tense but determined. "Captain, we've got multiple hostiles on the radar," Lieutenant Kara said, her voice calm despite the situation. "They're closing in fast." Marcus nodded, trying to mask the anxiety growing in his chest. "Brace for impact," he ordered. The Eagle was small compared to the alien warships that loomed on the screen, their massive forms like shadows against the stars. Yet, despite their size, it was humanity's will to survive that would give them the strength to fight. As the battle began, the Eagle moved in, dodging incoming plasma blasts with expert precision. The crew worked together flawlessly, each person knowing their role, their survival depending on each other. But the enemy was relentless. Every time the Eagle fired its weapons, the aliens countered with deadly force. And every time the Eagle managed to evade a blast, more alien ships appeared, forcing the humans to retreat further. "We can't keep this up for much longer," Kara said, her eyes wide with worry as the ship shuddered under another hit. "We're losing power." Marcus's mind raced. The Eagle had been through so many battles, but never like this. The Exile Thar were too many, too strong. And they weren't showing any signs of stopping. "We can't give up," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "Divert all power to shields. Focus on the enemy's weakest points. We need to hit them hard." As the crew worked to follow his orders, Marcus glanced at the readout. They were deep inside the war zone now, surrounded by hostile ships. There was no way out. The Eagle was surrounded, trapped in a deadly circle of fire. "We're surrounded, Captain," shouted Ensign Thompson from the communications station. "They've got us cornered." Marcus's heart pounded. This was it, the point where they either lived or died. But even in this dire moment, he refused to believe it was over. "Hold tight," he said. "There's always a way out." A sudden explosion rocked the ship. The Eagle lurched forward, the systems flickering. For a moment, the whole ship seemed to shake, and then silence fell over the crew. Marcus felt a chill run through him. Kara shouted, "The main engine's gone offline. We can't move." The reality of their situation hit like a punch to the gut. Without propulsion, the Eagle was sitting duck in the middle of a war zone, surrounded by enemy ships. "Can we fix it?" Marcus asked, fighting to stay calm. Kara's face turned pale. "Not in time. They'll tear us apart before we can get it back online." Marcus's mind raced. He needed to think fast. If they couldn't fix the engine, they needed to find another way to survive. "Focus on our weapons," he said, clenching his fists. "We need to make them think we're more dangerous than we look." The Eagle wasn't built for strength. It wasn't designed to go head-to-head with the massive warships surrounding them, but it was fast. And it was clever. The crew worked quickly, redirecting all available power to the ship's weapon systems, giving the Eagle one last chance to fight back. "Captain, we're ready," Kara said, her hands steady on the controls. "But we have one shot at this." Marcus nodded. Make it count. The ship's weapons fired, sending out a series of powerful blasts aimed directly at the largest alien warship. For a moment, it seemed like the blast would miss, but then, with a sudden surge, the energy hit the weak point of the alien ship. The explosion was massive, sending shockwaves through space. The Eagle's crew watched in awe as the massive alien ship was torn apart, its fragments scattering across the battlefield. But victory didn't come easy. The remaining alien forces were furious, and they retaliated with everything they had. The Eagle shook violently as another wave of attacks hit. The crew scrambled to keep the ship together, but the damage was severe. The ship was falling apart piece by piece. "We need to get out of here," shouted Kara. "We can't keep this up." Marcus refused to accept defeat. "No," he said, his voice cold with determination. "We're not running. Not yet. Keep fighting." Just as it seemed all hope was lost, something unexpected happened. A large group of human ships, reinforcements from Earth's last defenses, appeared out of the darkness. They had come at the last moment, just when everything seemed impossible. The alien forces, now outnumbered, began to retreat, unable to cope with the sudden strength of the humans. Marcus watched in disbelief as the remaining enemy ships turned tail, fleeing into the depths of space. The battle was over. The Eagle had survived, but the cost had been high. The ship was heavily damaged, and many of the crew members were injured. Yet, despite everything, humanity had won. They had faced certain death, and they had refused to give up. Marcus stood on the bridge, looking out at the wreckage of the battlefield. He knew that this wasn't just a victory for the Eagle or for Earth. It was a victory for every human who had fought and died, for every person who had refused to give in to fear. "We survived," Marcus whispered, "against all odds." And with that, he knew that humanity had proven something to the galaxy. No matter how dire the situation, no matter how impossible the odds, humanity would never stop fighting. And that, in the end, was their greatest strength. The war was far from over, but the stakes had just been raised. Humanity's fleet was battered and scattered, each ship fighting for its survival in a galaxy filled with alien enemies. The Titan's Fury, a massive warship, was one of the last remaining human ships, and it had just entered the most dangerous part of the war zone. As it arrived, a strange and chilling signal flashed across the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Nora said, her fingers flying across the console. "It's from the enemy." Captain Jacob Roberts stood tall, his expression serious as he watched the screen. A distorted image of an alien commander appeared. The creature's face was dark and unreadable, but its voice was clear. "This is your final warning, humans. In 1 hour, the weapon will be activated. Your fleet is already doomed. You have no hope of surviving." The transmission cut off abruptly, and a countdown appeared on the screen. 1 hour. Just 60 minutes to prevent the complete destruction of humanity's last hope. The Titan's Fury was the only ship left in range to stop the alien weapon, and the clock was ticking. "We can't waste time," Captain Roberts said, his voice low and determined. "All hands to battle stations. We have an hour to save the fleet." As the crew scrambled to prepare for the mission, Roberts stood still for a moment, staring at the countdown. He knew what this meant. If they failed, not only would humanity lose its last stronghold, but the enemy's weapon would obliterate any hope of victory. There was no turning back now. The Titan's Fury sped through the war zone, weaving between asteroids and debris from destroyed ships. The alien fleet was large, and their forces were stronger than ever. Every moment brought them closer to the weapon, and every moment also brought them closer to the edge of disaster. "Captain, the enemy fleet is ahead," Lieutenant Nora reported, her voice tense. "We can't avoid them." "Then we fight," Roberts said firmly. "Prepare the weapons. Engage at will." The Titan's Fury fired its weapons, and the enemy ships responded with their own deadly fire. The battle raged around them, but the crews stayed focused. They couldn't afford distractions. They needed to stop the weapon. They had 1 hour, just 1 hour, to end the war. "We've got company," said Commander Tessa, the ship's tactical officer, pointing at the view screen. A massive alien warship was moving directly toward them, its weapon systems charging up. This ship was different. Its sheer size and firepower made it a terrifying threat. "The weapon," Roberts muttered. "They're protecting it." Suddenly, the Titan's fury shook violently as the alien ship fired a barrage of missiles. The hull groaned under the strain. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship. "Shields holding," Nora reported. "But we can't take much more of this." "We don't have the luxury of time," Roberts replied, gritting his teeth. "Focus fire on the enemy's weapons. Take them out first." As the crew fired back, Roberts's eyes kept darting to the countdown on the screen. 45 minutes left. Every shot they fired, every move they made was calculated, but the alien ship was relentless. It seemed to be everywhere at once, appearing and disappearing with impossible speed, firing from every angle. "Captain," Commander Tessa said urgently, "the alien warship is preparing to launch the weapon." "Where's the target?" Roberts asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "The weapon is located in the center of their fleet," Tessa replied, scanning the data. "But the center is heavily guarded. We'll have to take down their defenses first." "Get me a direct line to the weapon," Roberts ordered. "I don't care what it takes. We have less than 40 minutes left." The Titan's fury maneuvered through the chaos of the battlefield, taking fire from multiple enemy ships. The crew worked in perfect synchronization, firing their weapons and dodging enemy blasts. Yet, every second that passed seemed to shorten their chances of stopping the weapon. "Shields at 50%, Nora called out, her voice strained. Roberts clenched his fists. "Hold together. We're almost there." They were so close now. The weapon was within range. But the alien fleet had no intention of letting the humans get any closer. As the Titan's fury charged forward, another wave of alien ships arrived, cutting off their path. "There's no way through," Tessa shouted. "They're surrounding us." "We make a way," Roberts said, his voice unwavering. "Prepare the vortex cannon." "We're breaking through." The vortex cannon was humanity's last-ditch weapon, a device capable of creating a temporary rift in space. If they could fire it at the center of the enemy fleet, it might create an opening big enough to reach the weapon and destroy it. But the vortex cannon was unstable, and using it was risky. One wrong move, and they could tear apart the entire sector of space they were fighting in. "Captain," Nora said urgently, "the cannon is ready. But we're going to need every ounce of power we have to charge it." "We don't have time to wait," Roberts replied. "Fire it." The crew held their breath as the vortex cannon powered up. With a deafening roar, a wave of energy shot out from the Titan's fury, tearing a rift through space. The alien ships scattered in confusion as the rift opened, creating a path toward the weapon. The crew cheered, but Roberts knew the battle wasn't over. They had one shot to take down the weapon before the rift closed. "Move! Move!" Roberts barked, urging the crew to push forward. The Titan's fury sped through the rift, heading straight for the heart of the alien fleet. The weapon was in sight, a massive, pulsating core of energy, surrounded by an impenetrable shield. The clock was ticking. The countdown was at 15 minutes. "We need to disable the shield," Tessa shouted. "The vortex cannon won't work on it. Then we destroy it with everything we've got," Roberts yelled. The Titan's fury opened fire with all its remaining weapons, targeting the shield's weak points. The energy crackled, and with each blast, the shield flickered. Finally, with a massive explosion, the shield shattered. "We're in," Nora shouted. With one last blast, the Titan's fury fired its main cannon directly at the weapon's core. The explosion that followed was deafening. The weapon was destroyed in a massive burst of light. "We did it," Roberts breathed, watching the wreckage of the alien weapon disappear. "We stopped the countdown." The enemy fleet began to retreat, realizing they had lost their advantage. Humanity had won this battle. But the war was far from over. As Roberts looked out at the wreckage, he knew that this victory was only a small step. There were more battles to come, more challenges. But for now, humanity had proven something to the galaxy. They would not be defeated. In the heart of the galaxy, A strange and unsettling silence had settled over the battlefield. The enemy fleet, the Zurians, were notorious for their overwhelming numbers and ferocious power. Yet, something had changed. They had stopped their advance. Their ships sat motionless, as if waiting for something, and for the humans aboard the Endurance, this silence was more terrifying than any battle cry. Captain Daniel Clark stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen. His warship, the Endurance, was one of the few remaining human vessels, and it had been sent into the heart of Zurian territory to investigate the silence. The entire fleet was in position, but no one moved. No communication, no weapons fire, not even a sign of life from the enemy. "Captain, we've been in this position for 20 minutes, Lieutenant Andre Brooks said, her fingers tapping nervously on her console. There's no sign of activity. No energy signatures. No movement. Clark rubbed his chin, his eyes fixed on the dark void ahead. "Something's wrong," he muttered. "Prepare for any possibility. Keep shields at full power and weapons primed. We can't afford to relax." But relaxation wasn't what the crew wanted. Everyone on the Endurance was on edge. The Zurians didn't sit still. They were relentless, attacking with speed and precision. The silence felt like the calm before the storm, and Clark knew it. He felt it in his bones. Something was about to happen. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The Zurian warships blinked to life, emerging from their eerie stillness, like ghosts rising from the shadows. The enemy ships activated their weapons, and Clark's stomach twisted as the first blast of energy erupted across the dark space, targeting the Endurance. "Shields holding," Lieutenant Brooks called out, her voice calm, but the tension was clear. "But they've got us locked in their sights. There's no way out. Prepare to retaliate," Clark ordered, his voice commanding. "Return fire." The Endurance fired back, its energy weapons lighting up the void, but the Zurians were fast. Their ships weaved through the attacks with impossible precision, and every shot from the Endurance seemed to miss by mere inches. The Zurians were playing with them, toying with their prey. As the battle raged, Clark's mind raced. The Endurance wasn't built for this kind of fight. The Zurian ships were bigger, faster, and stronger. The only advantage they had was their stealth and strategy. "They're toying with us," Clark said, frustration rising in his voice. "They're making us chase them." Lieutenant Brooks's face paled as another energy blast slammed into the ship, rattling the entire bridge. "We're losing power, Captain. We're not going to last much longer." Clark clenched his fists. The silence had been a trap, a strategy to wear them down. The Zurians had made them think they had time to prepare, and now they were paying the price. "Captain," Commander Elena Wright, the ship's tactical officer, said urgently, "they're retreating. The Zurians are pulling back." Clark's eyes narrowed. "What?" The Endurance's sensors confirmed that the enemy ships were no longer engaging in combat. They were leaving. But why? "What's going on?" Clark muttered, his mind racing. "This doesn't make sense." "We've got incoming," Brooks called out. "Another fleet. But these aren't Zurian ships. They're human." Clark's eyes widened in disbelief. "What do you mean?" "Another fleet, confirmed." "A human fleet, Captain," Brooks said, her voice filled with surprise. "They're coming in fast." But how?" Clark was stunned. He had been in deep Zurian space for so long that any human forces in the area should have been years away. But now, just as the Endurance was about to be destroyed, a fleet of human warships emerged from the dark side of a nearby moon. The fleet was huge, easily twice the size of the Endurance, and it was moving toward the Zurian ships with terrifying precision. The Zurians, realizing they were no longer the dominant force, immediately turned their ships around and began to flee. "They're retreating," Clark said in astonishment. "But who are they? Where did they come from?" "We've got incoming communication from the new fleet," Brooks said, her voice shaking. "They want to speak with you, Captain." Clark stepped forward, his curiosity and caution mixing in equal measure. He stood by the communications console as the screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was one Clark didn't recognize an older man with a stern expression and a uniform that wasn't from any fleet Clark had ever seen. "Captain Clark," the man said, his voice low and commanding. "I am Admiral Victor Blackwood. I've been following your movements for some time now. It's good to see you still alive." Clark stared at the screen, his mind racing. "Admiral Blackwood? I don't know who you are or where you've come from, but you've just saved our lives." "Not exactly, Captain," Blackwood said, his expression unreadable. "You weren't the ones I was saving." "What do you mean?" Clark asked, confused. "The Zurians," Blackwood continued. "They weren't after you. They were after something much bigger. Something that would have destroyed your entire fleet. But we've been tracking them. They were never meant to succeed." Clark's heart pounded in his chest. "What's going on? What are they after?" "The silent warship, Captain," Blackwood said. "It's a weapon unlike anything you've ever seen. The Zurians were trying to get to it before we did." Clark's mind raced as he tried to process what Blackwood was saying. A weapon? A silent warship? The implications were enormous, and it was clear that the battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. "We'll need your help," Blackwood said, his eyes locking with Clark's. "The Zurians won't stop until they have it. And if they do, no one will be safe." Clark swallowed hard, his mind filled with questions. "How do we stop them?" "You don't," Blackwood said, a dark edge to his voice. "You survive. And then you fight." As the transmission ended, Clark turned to face his crew. The Zurians had retreated, but the true battle was just beginning. The Endurance had been part of something much bigger than they had ever realized. The silent warship was out there, waiting. And they were about to find IT.IN, the darkness of space. The human fleet was at its breaking point. The Zurians, a relentless alien force, had invaded every corner of the galaxy, leaving destruction in their wake. One by one, human colonies fell. One by one, human warships were destroyed. The last remnants of humanity's military power were now concentrated on a single ship, the Hopebringer. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen as the Hopebringer sailed toward the heart of the Zurian Empire. The ship was barely holding together. Shields flickered in and out of existence, weapon systems were offline, and the crew was exhausted from months of constant fighting. Yet, despite everything, they had one mission left to complete: destroy the Zurian flagship, the Eternal Dominion. "It's a suicide mission, Captain," Commander Lucas Williams said, his voice low. He had been with her from the start, and he could see the toll this war had taken on her. "We don't have the resources to take them down. We're outgunned, outnumbered." Sarah turned to him, her face resolute. "If we don't stop the Eternal Dominion, humanity is finished. We've got one shot, Lucas. One shot to end this." The crew watched silently, knowing that their future depended on Sarah's decision. The Hopebringer was their last hope, and they had no choice but to push forward. The ship continued to move through the war zone, dodging debris from destroyed ships, both human and Zurian. The Eternal Dominion loomed in the distance, a massive warship that had been the Zurian command center for the entire war. If it fell, the rest of the fleet would crumble. "Captain," Lieutenant Rachel Moore said, her voice tense. "We're approaching the Eternal Dominion. Their sensors are already locking on to us." "We've been expected," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "Initiate evasive maneuvers. We need to close the distance without being detected." But it was too late. As soon as the Hopebringer entered the Zurian fleet's sensor range, the Eternal Dominion fired a barrage of missiles, each one a death sentence. The ship rocked violently as explosions shook the hull. "Shields at 40%, Lieutenant Moore shouted, her hands flying over the controls. "We're not going to last long like this," Commander Williams added, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to get closer to their core and disable their defenses." Sarah nodded, her mind already calculating their next move. She had been in countless battles, but this felt different. This wasn't just a fight for victory, it was a fight for survival. "Steady, everyone," Sarah said, her voice sharp and commanding. "Prepare to fire the main cannon on my mark. We need to make this count." The Hopebringer weaved between incoming missiles, its engines screaming as it pushed forward. The crew held their breath as they drew closer to the Eternal Dominion. The massive ship loomed like a shadow in front of them, and every moment brought them closer to death. Locking onto their shield generator, Lieutenant Moore called out, "We've got a clear shot. Fire!" Sarah ordered. The Hopebringer unleashed its full power. The main cannon fired, sending a beam of energy straight toward the Eternal Dominion. The shot struck its shield, but it barely made a dent. "Shield's holding," Moore reported, her voice tight. "We need to break through that barrier. Then we do it the old-fashioned way," Sarah said, determination in her voice. "All hands, prepare for boarding action." The crew's eyes widened. A boarding mission into the heart of the Zurian flagship was a suicide mission in itself, but it was the only option they had left. "Get the boarding pods ready," Commander Williams ordered. His voice firm. As the Hopebringer drew closer to the Eternal Dominion, the enemy ship unleashed another wave of missiles, but this time Sarah was ready. The Hopebringer deployed its boarding pods, launching them directly toward the Zurian warship. "Captain, they're closing in on us," Moore shouted, fear creeping into her voice. "They're preparing to fire." The Hopebringer shook again as more missiles slammed into the ship, but the boarding pods were already on their way. "Hold together," Sarah shouted, gripping the armrests of her chair. "We're almost there." The crew braced for impact as the Hopebringer came within range of the Eternal Dominion. The boarding pods struck the massive Zurian warship with explosive force, creating a hole in its defenses, large enough for the Hopebringer to slip through. "We've made it through," Commander Williams exclaimed. "Now, it's up to the ground teams." Sarah watched as the ground teams deployed onto the enemy ship. It was a dangerous mission. The Zurians were fierce, and the Eternal Dominion was heavily defended. But this was humanity's last hope, and they couldn't afford to fail. The ground teams fought their way through the corridors of the Zurian flagship, their weapons blazing as they encountered heavy resistance. They pushed forward, determined to reach the heart of the ship where the core generator was located. "We're almost there," Sergeant Alan Rise, leader of the ground team, said over the comm. "But we're taking heavy losses." Sarah gritted her teeth. She knew how high the stakes were. They couldn't stop now. They had to keep pushing forward. "Keep going," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. "We need that core generator destroyed." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ground team reached the heart of the Eternal Dominion. Sergeant Reyes planted the explosive charges on the core generator, and the countdown began. "Charges are set," Reyes reported. "Get ready to evacuate." But as the countdown ticked down, a new alarm sounded. The Zurians had activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. The countdown was accelerating. "Get out, now!" Commander Williams ordered. "The whole ship is gonna blow." The ground teams rushed back to the boarding pods, but time was running out. The Hopebringer had only moments to escape before the Eternal Dominion's explosion consumed them all. 3, 2, 1. The countdown echoed through the ship. Detonation in 5 seconds. The boarding pods launched back toward the Hopebringer, the explosion from the Eternal Dominion lighting up the darkness of space. The shockwave hit the Hopebringer, rocking it violently, but they had made it. The crew watched as the Eternal Dominion was obliterated in a blinding flash of light. The warship's destruction sent ripples through the entire Zurian fleet, causing chaos and disarray. For the first time in months, there was hope. "We did it," Sarah said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." The Zurians were retreating. Their flagship was destroyed, their forces in disarray. The Hopebringer had brought humanity's last hope to life, and with it, the chance for a new beginning. But Sarah knew the war was not over. The victory was just the beginning of a long and difficult path. However, one thing was certain: humanity had a fighting chance.